You know, they say blood is thicker than water, but sometimes I wonder if that's just something we tell ourselves to sleep better at night. My name is Margaret, and at 67, I thought I'd seen enough of life's cruelties to prepare me for anything. I was wrong. It started with what seemed like a blessing, my son David calling me on a Tuesday evening in March, his voice unusually warm over the phone. "Mom, Lisa, and I have been talking," he said, referring to his wife of 15 years. "We think you should come stay with us, instead of being alone in that big house after Dad passed." My heart fluttered with hope. After Robert's death 8 months prior, the silence in our Victorian home had become deafening. The walls that once echoed with laughter now seemed to mock my solitude. "Are you sure, sweetheart? I don't want to be a burden." "Nonsense, Mom. Family takes care of family. We have that guest room that's just sitting empty anyway." Lisa's voice chimed in from the background, though I could barely make out her words. Something about it being the right thing to do. 2 weeks later, I found myself standing in their pristine colonial home in Newton, my 2 suitcases feeling heavier than they should have. The house was everything mine wasn't. Modern, sterile, and cold, despite the expensive furnishings. "Welcome. Home, Mom," David said, though his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Lisa appeared from the kitchen, her blonde hair perfectly styled even at 8 in the morning. "Margaret, we're so glad you're here. I've prepared the guest room for you. The blue room upstairs. The blue room, not your room." The distinction wasn't lost on me, but I pushed the thought away. I was being ungrateful. The first few days passed pleasantly enough. I cooked breakfast for everyone, something I'd always loved doing. David would kiss my cheek and praise my pancakes just like when he was 12. Lisa would smile politely and push the food around her plate, mentioning her gluten sensitivity. But then came the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. The meaningful glances between David and Lisa. The way they'd suddenly changed the subject when I appeared. It was Friday evening when I overheard them talking in their bedroom, their voices carrying through the thin walls. "I thought you said it." "Would only be for a month or 2, Lisa hissed. "I know, but she just lost Dad. What am I supposed to do, throw her out?" "She's taking over the kitchen, David. Yesterday she rearranged my spice rack, and the way she looks at me when I order takeout instead of cooking, like I'm some kind of failure. She's just trying to help. She's driving me crazy. And don't get me started on how she monopolizes the TV every evening with those old movies." My hands trembled as I pressed my ear closer to the wall. "Look," David's voice was firmer now. "I have that business conference in Chicago next week. You'll have to manage her while I'm gone." "How long?" 2 weeks. Maybe 3. The silence that followed was pregnant with unspoken resentment. That Sunday, David made the announcement over dinner. "Mom, I have to travel for work. It's a big opportunity, a potential merger that could set us up for life." "How wonderful, dear. How long will you be gone?" "A few weeks. But don't worry. Lisa will take good care of you." Lisa's fork paused halfway to her mouth, and for a split second, I saw something flash in her eyes, something that made my blood run cold. Monday morning came too quickly. David hugged me goodbye, his embrace feeling like an apology for something I didn't yet understand. "Be good to Lisa, Mom. She's got a lot on her plate with her new job." And then he was gone, leaving behind a silence that felt different from the comfortable quiet I'd known with Robert. This silence had teeth. Lisa waited exactly 2 hours after David's departure before the mask came off. "Margaret, we need to establish some ground rules," she said, standing in the kitchen doorway like a general addressing her troops. "This is my house and I have my routines. I'd appreciate it if you could respect that." "Of course, dear. What would you like me to do differently?" Her smile was razor sharp. "For starters, I'll handle all the cooking. You don't need to worry about that anymore. Also, I prefer to have my morning coffee in silence, so if you could stay in your room until after 9, that would be perfect." My room. Not the guest room anymore. My room. As if I were a child being sent to her corner. I understand you're used to being the lady of the house, Lisa continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy. But this isn't your house, Margaret. I think it's important we both remember that. The words hit me like physical blows, but I managed to nod. I'll try to stay out of your way. Good. I knew you'd understand. The next 2 weeks became a masterclass in psychological warfare. Lisa would forget to cook enough dinner for two, leaving me to scrounge for crackers and cheese. She'd blast music early in the morning, claiming she couldn't sleep, then complain when I moved around upstairs during my designated hours. She invited friends over without telling me, and I'd emerge from my room to find strangers in the living room, all conversation stopping as they stared at me like I was an unwelcome ghost. "Oh, that's David's mother," Lisa would say with a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "She's staying with us temporarily. Poor thing has nowhere else to go." The pity in their eyes was worse than anger would have been. But the worst part was the phone calls with David. Every evening at 7, like clockwork, Lisa would answer his call with a performance worthy of Broadway. "Oh, we're doing wonderful, honey. Your mother and I are getting along famously. She's been such a help." Then she'd hand me the phone with eyes that promised consequences if I said anything different. "How are things, Mom?" David would ask, and I could hear the exhaustion in his voice, the stress of his business dealings. "Fine, sweetheart. Lisa's taking very good care of me." What else could I say? That his wife was slowly erasing me from existence? That I felt like a prisoner in the blue room? That some nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering how I'd raised a son who could abandon me so easily. 3 weeks into David's absence, Lisa dropped the final bombshell. "Margaret, I need to talk to you about something important." I looked up from the book I was reading, one of the few comforts I had left. "David and I have been discussing your situation, and we think it might be best if you considered other living arrangements." My heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "There's a lovely assisted living facility about 20 minutes from here. Sunset Manor. I've already spoken to them, and they have an opening. It would be so much better for you. Activities, people your own age, proper care." "I don't need care, Lisa. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself." Her laugh was sharp and cruel. "Margaret, be realistic. You're almost 70. Living alone isn't safe anymore. And honestly, this arrangement isn't working for David and me. We're newlyweds, practically. We need our space." Newlyweds. They'd been married for 15 years. Does David know about this? It was his idea, actually. He's just too kind to tell you himself. The move is scheduled for next Friday. I've already put down the deposit. The room spun around me. In that moment, I felt every one of my 67 years settling into my bones like lead weights. This was it. This was how it ended. Not with dignity or respect, but being shuffled off to die among strangers by the son I'd raised with all the love in my heart. That night, I called my sister Dorothy in Florida. "Maggie, what's wrong? You sound terrible." Through tears, I told her everything. Every humiliation, every cruel word, every moment I'd been made to feel like garbage in my own son's home. Dorothy was quiet for a long moment. Then, in a voice I hadn't heard since we were children getting into trouble together, she said, "Pack your bags, sister. You're coming to stay with me." "Dottie, I can't. I don't want to be a burden to you, too." "Burden? Maggie, I've been rattling around in this big house since Harold died. I'd love the company. Besides, remember what Mama used to say?" I smiled through my tears, remembering our mother's favorite saying. "Thompson women don't stay where they're not wanted, and they sure as hell don't beg for scraps of affection." "I'll book you a flight for Thursday," Dorothy continued, "one day before their little eviction date." "But Dorothy, I can't just leave. Can't you?" What exactly are you leaving behind, Maggie? A son who won't stand up for his own mother? A daughter-in-law who treats you like hired help? Pack light, sister. Pack very light. That Wednesday night, I sat in the blue room, my room, and thought about the woman I used to be. For 35 years, I'd been the principal of Lincoln Elementary School. I'd handled budget crises, difficult parents, and teachers twice my size who thought they could intimidate me. I'd raised David as a single mother for the first 8 years of his life after his father walked out, working 2 jobs to keep us afloat. I'd survived Robert's long battle with cancer, holding his hand through chemotherapy sessions and staying strong when he couldn't. I'd buried my parents, my first husband, and more friends than I cared to count. When had I become this timid creature, grateful for scraps of kindness from my own child? The answer came to me as I looked through old photos I'd brought from home. It was gradual, this erosion of self. It started with Robert's illness, when I'd become a caregiver first and Margaret second. Then his death, when grief had hollowed me out. And finally, David's invitation, which I'd mistaken for love but was really just obligation wrapped in prettier paper. I'd forgotten who I was, but forgetting isn't the same as disappearing. Thursday morning, I woke before dawn. My flight wasn't until afternoon, but I had things to do. Important things. I dressed carefully in my navy suit, the one I'd worn to parent-teacher conferences, when I needed to project authority. I did my hair and makeup with the same precision I'd used every morning for 3 decades in education. Then I sat down at Lisa's pristine kitchen table and began to write. The first letter was to David. My dearest son, by the time you read this, I'll be in Florida with Aunt Dorothy. I want you to know that I don't blame you for what's happened here. Grief makes us do strange things, and perhaps I was holding on to you too tightly, trying to recreate something that was never meant to be. But I raised you to be better than this. David, I raised you to stand up for what's right, to protect those who can't protect themselves, and to honor the people who sacrificed for you. Your father and I worked our fingers to the bone to give you every opportunity, every advantage we never had. I'm not asking you to choose between your wife and your mother. I'm asking you to choose between right and wrong. Between the man I raised you to be and the man you've allowed yourself to become. I love you. I will always love you, but I won't stay where I'm not wanted, and I won't beg for affection from my own child. Your mother, Margaret. The second letter was for Lisa, and it was much shorter. Lisa, you win. I'm leaving. But let me tell you something about winning, dear. Sometimes when you get everything you want, you discover it's not nearly as valuable as what you threw away to get it. I hope you and David will be very happy together in your perfect house with your perfect life. I hope you never find yourself old and alone, dependent on the kindness of someone who sees you as nothing but an inconvenience. But if you do, I hope you remember this moment. I hope you remember the choice you made when someone needed your compassion, and you offered cruelty instead. Margaret Thompson, former principal, Lincoln Elementary School, mother of David Thompson, wife of the late Robert Thompson, and a woman worth far more than you ever gave her credit for. I sealed both letters and placed them prominently on the kitchen counter. Then I did something I hadn't done in months. I cooked. I made Robert's favorite beef stew, the one that had taken me years to perfect. I baked my grandmother's apple pie from scratch, the recipe I'd never written down because it lived in my hands and heart. I prepared enough food to last a week, portioned it carefully, and filled the refrigerator and freezer. Finally, I cleaned the house from top to bottom, not because anyone asked me to, but because it was who I was. I'd never left a mess for someone else to clean up, and I wasn't about to start now. At noon, the taxi arrived. I took one last look around the blue room, making sure I'd left nothing of importance behind. Then, I walked downstairs with my 2 suitcases, my head held high. Lisa was in the living room, on the phone with one of her friends, gossiping about someone's divorce. She looked up as I passed, her eyes widening as she took in my appearance. Margaret? Where are you going? I paused at the front door. I'm going home, Lisa. To a place where I'm wanted. But your flight to the facility isn't until tomorrow. I have all the paperwork. You can throw your paperwork away. Along with those letters on the kitchen counter. Make sure David gets his. For the first time since I'd known her, Lisa was speechless. The taxi driver helped me with my bags, and as we pulled away from the house, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Relief. The flight to Tampa was smooth, and Dorothy was waiting for me at the gate with tears in her eyes and a sign that read, "Welcome home, Maggie." "Look at you," she said, hugging me tight. "You look like yourself again." And I did. Somewhere between writing those letters and walking out that door, I'd found the woman I'd lost. Dorothy's house in Clearwater was everything Lisa's wasn't. Warm, lived in, full of laughter and memories. She'd prepared the guest room, which she immediately started calling Maggie's room, with fresh flowers and pictures of us as children. "Now," she said over dinner that first night, "tell me about this business venture of David's." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "The merger he's working on. You said he was in Chicago for 3 weeks?" "Yes, some big opportunity." I stopped mid-sentence as Dorothy's expression changed. "Maggie, honey, I hate to tell you this, but David's Facebook page shows him in Cancun. Has for the past week. Looks like he and Lisa took a little vacation." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Not only had they planned to get rid of me, but they'd lied about it. David hadn't been suffering through business meetings. He'd been sipping cocktails on a beach while his wife systematically destroyed what was left of my dignity. But instead of crushing me, this final revelation did something unexpected. It set me free. "Good," I said, and Dorothy looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Good?" "Good. Now I know exactly who they are, and I can stop making excuses for them." That weekend, I started my new life. Dorothy and I joined a book club, signed up for water aerobics, and began volunteering at the local literacy center. Within a month, I was helping adult learners with their reading skills, something that felt like coming back to life after a long illness. I made friends, real friends who valued my opinion and sought my advice. I laughed until my sides hurt, and went to bed each night excited about the next day instead of dreading it. 3 months after I left Boston, my phone rang. David's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment, I considered not answering. But I was curious. "Mom?" His voice was small, uncertain. "Hello, David." "Mom, we came home, and you were gone. Lisa showed me your letters. I'm sure she did. Are you in Florida? Are you okay?" "I'm wonderful, actually." "How was Cancun?" The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. "Mom, I can explain." "Can you? Can you explain why you lied to me? Can you explain why you let your wife treat me like garbage while you were taking selfies on the beach?" "It wasn't like that." "What was it like, David? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you and Lisa planned a lovely vacation while plotting to dump me in a nursing home. Did you enjoy yourselves?" I could hear him crying, and despite everything, my heart ached for him. He was still my little boy, the one who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I never meant for things to go so far. Lisa said you'd be happier with people your own age, and I thought maybe she was right. Stop." My voice was firm but not cruel. "Stop making excuses, David. You're a grown man. You made choices. Own them. Can I see you? Can I come to Florida?" I looked out at Dorothy's garden, where she was watering her prize-winning roses. I thought about the life I was building here, the peace I'd found, the respect I'd reclaimed. "Not yet," I said finally. "Maybe someday, when you've figured out who you want to be. But not yet. I love you, Mom. I know you do." But love isn't. Enough, David. Love without respect, without consideration, without basic human decency. That's not love. That's just need dressed up in prettier clothes. After I hung up, Dorothy found me on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Free," I said, and meant it. 6 months later, I received a package in the mail. No return address, but I recognized David's handwriting. Inside was a framed photo of him as a little boy, sitting on my lap while I read him Goodnight Moon. There was also an envelope containing divorce papers, Lisa's signature prominently displayed, and a short note. "Mom, you were right about everything. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. I hope someday I can be the man you raised me to be. Love." David, I set the photo on my dresser and threw the note away. Some apologies come too late to matter, and some bridges burn so completely that no amount of regret can rebuild them. But as I looked at that picture of my little boy, I felt something I hadn't expected. Forgiveness. Not for what he'd done, but for who he'd become. And more importantly, I felt pride in who I'd become. I'd spent 67 years learning how to be strong, how to be kind, how to love unconditionally. But it wasn't until I learned how to leave that I truly learned how to live. Today, I volunteer at 3 different organizations. I'm writing a book about my years in education. I have friends who call just to chat, and a sister who reminds me daily that I'm wanted, valued, and loved. I have a garden that blooms year-round, a book club that argues passionately about character development, and a future that's entirely my own. Some people say I was too harsh, that families should forgive and forget, but I learned something important in that blue room in Newton. Respect is not optional, dignity is not negotiable, and love without honor is just manipulation wearing a prettier mask. I'm Margaret Elizabeth Thompson. I was a teacher, a principal, a wife, and a mother. I am a sister, a friend, a volunteer, and a woman who knows her worth. And I will never again stay anywhere. I'm not wanted or beg for scraps of affection from people who should love me unconditionally. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's worst behavior. Sometimes the story doesn't end with reconciliation and hugs. Sometimes it ends with a woman finding herself again and discovering that she was worth saving all along. That's my story. That's my truth. And I'm finally, beautifully, completely at peace with it.